Good morning, everybody. I see a lot of new faces in the audience. Welcome to Creative Mornings on this here Friday, June, whatever, at the end of the world or the beginning of the new world. Can you pass me the clicker? Is that the clicker? Oh, manually. Beautiful. Well, then I don't need that. Great. If you can't tell, I'm out of practice. My name is Obiakwe Okolo. I have the pleasure of filling in today for Kaylee Bryant Greenwell, who is your Creative Mornings DC host. Kaylee is working. She is traveling for work, so she cannot be in two places at once because we have not quite figured that part of technology out yet. But I'm sure someone's working on it. I had the honor of being host for 3 years prior to handing the job off. Creative Mornings. How many of you have never been to a CM before? First timers, raise your hand. Okay, solid pocket. Welcome, welcome. For those who don't know, Creative Mornings is a global creative community that gathers once a month all over the world. It started in a small design studio in New York City, founded by a woman named Tina Roth Eisenberg, who was just frustrated with the state of continuing education in creative spaces. Shit costs too much, basically. And she was like, I want my people, I want my community to be inspired and to be filled for free. So she started to invite a lot of her very heavy-hitting friends, artists and designers like Stefan Sagmeister, Seth Godin, Michael Beirut into her studio to talk to her team and their friends for free once a month. And what started with a room full of 15 people has ballooned into a global community of 62 chapters and just around 250,000 people doing what you are doing today every month. It's pretty cool. Can I go to the next slide? Great. Every month we get to speak to a specific theme, and the themes are all selected the year prior. Today's theme is punk, and I don't think that there is a better time and a better place to be having this conversation than in this city under the ground at this time in our global history. So I'm really excited for the conversation that we're about to have. Next slide, Tai Tai. Thank you. All of this is made possible by sponsors, both global and local. How many of you guys are familiar with Adobe? You should be. Great. But we are still going to talk about Adobe. I used to throw a lot of shade at MailChimp because you all know what MailChimp was. You were here when I used to skip that slide. I won't be skipping this slide because Adobe is not just supporting Creative Mornings at a global scale, providing resources for our website, which is sort of a network of websites for all the chapters, and our email listservs. And all the other things that make this thing work. But also they are now looking at specific individual markets and donating money to those markets. And we are one of them. Breakfast today was provided by Adobe. So shout out to the sponsors who make this happen at a global scale. We've also got local sponsors. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to say something here about something that Adobe's doing called Level Up. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't write the script, so I don't know what this is. I'm sure if you Google Adobe, I'm sure if you Google Adobe Level Up, you'll find what you need to find. My bad, Adobe. The breakfast is great, though. I appreciate it. Our local sponsors are also invaluable to us, and quite frankly, are the ones who make the thing happen on the ground. Every single time. Charlestown AV, shout out to Lauren. She's back there on the camera. Hi, Lauren. Lauren, Jeremy, Chris, they are providing all of our AV resources and making sure that the conversations that we have on stage are recorded for posterity and for those who cannot be in the room. And for you who are in the room to be reminded about what we talked about. It's something that was a big deal when we got it back post-pandemic because it really did make these things more accessible. And they give this service to us for free. If there's any events folks in the room, you know how much AV services and recording cost. So please, please, please show them your appreciation whenever you have a chance. And quite frankly, they're consummate professionals, so hire them whenever you have a chance because that's why they're doing this, is so they can get hired by you creative folk. Also, Plants Alive, if you ever see us having any sort of accessibility commendations on stage, whether it be ASL interpretation or closed captioning, that's provided by Plants Alive. I'm a big fan of volunteerism. I love when people contribute. I think whatever we have next in this world, whatever healing happens, comes from a culture of contribution. That said, I'm going to ask folk to contribute their time. I'm rarely going to ask you to contribute your craft because that is valuable. And I think the craft of interpretation and providing accessible services for people who need it is something we should pay for. So rather than asking for someone to volunteer, I asked for someone to pay for it, and they said yes. So shout out to Plants Alive for providing that resource. And our title sponsor this year is a fun little company called Taste Coffee. Taste is a direct-to-consumer coffee roaster that believes that coffee should be good all the time, that believes that coffee should be a ritual that adds to our lives and not a substance that detracts from our bodies, and that believes that shit should just be cool for cool's sake. Creative Mornings DC needs good coffee. Taste is a title sponsor, which means that I'm saying they, full transparency, I'm one of the co-founders of this company. I did this after I left the stage, so I never thought I'd have this conflict of interest, but it's a thing that I'm doing. It's a thing that I'm doing with two dear friends of mine. It's a thing that we have big dreams and aspirations for, and it's a thing that was born in Washington, D.C., out of the heart and minds of a native Washingtonian, his best friend who is approximate native Washingtonian, and me, who just gets to fucking rock along with these two incredible human beings who moved here 12 years ago and loves the city deeply. So to celebrate the fact that this thing was born here, and really a lot of it was born in this room, in these Creative Morning spaces, we are offering a promo code to all members of this community. That maybe is on the next slide, but maybe it's not. It might not be. That's why Tyler's not going there. Shout out to smart slide operators. The promo code is CMDC15. It'll give you 15% off your first order of Taste Coffee. TASTcoffee.com. Any questions? Great. We're going to keep rolling. Thank you to DuPont Underground. All of our venues are also donated. You would not imagine, I say this all the time, I used to get messages from chapters all over the world saying, how on earth did you end up in a Smithsonian? Where did you get the money for that? And I'm like, real talk, no money. Generosity. A lot of chapters are meeting wherever they can, and wherever they can is high school gyms and rec centers, and we just so happen to have world-class facilities with world-class generosity that want us in their space. So shout out to DuPont Underground. Again, there might not be a better place to have this conversation, and the exhibit that's up right now, I hope you guys are taking a look at all the art and the multimedia art that's on the walls and the makeshift walls down this hallway. You'll have more time after our event to do that. Did the mic just get real hot? Anybody else? Okay, great. We're still good? Better? Okay, great, sorry. I don't know why. And last but not least, the sort of human power that makes this thing happen. All of your volunteers, you've seen them at the door. They're smiling at you. They're serving you coffee. They are the hands and feet of this organization, and none of them are being paid to be here. They're all doing it, again, out of a heart of contribution and out of a culture of contribution. So if you see them, please thank them. And if you want to be one of them, please send an email to Amari. dc@creativemornings.com, and then also amaridonovan@gmail.com, and we'll get you plugged in where you fit and where we need you. Sound good? Great. Next. Field trips. Again, global community that exists in person also exists online. We did this whole thing called the pandemic. It was awful. We hated it. We created all of these online resources to make it possible to gather. And then we came back into rooms, and we still have all those online resources. So we get to sort of benefit from the best of both worlds. So if you're ever starved for creative energy, if you're ever wondering what's happening in other chapters all over the world, and you can't quite make it there, tap in. Tap into creativemornings.com/field trips. And if you're ever in another city on a Friday, and again, I've said this over and over again, I mean it wholeheartedly, if you're ever in any city, anywhere in the world on a Friday, hop on the Creative Mornings page and just see. Odds are pretty good that something's going on. It's a really good way to plug in, make some friends globally. I have friends globally and all over the country who are hosts, who are chapter members, who are former speakers, and it's a really great community of creative folk. Bring a friend. It makes things better. Punk. I'm going to read because I'm going to read. I have a microphone and you guys can't stop me. I'm actually not going to read. Sorry, guys. You've met me. We've done this before, right? Sorry for the newcomers. It's more polished than this normally. I'm just bad at this right now. Punk is an interesting theme in general. It's sort of this word that is also a genre, but genre is also not a real thing. And it's an aesthetic, and it's a sound, and it's a spirit that exists in a lot of other aesthetics and sounds. But punk has a deep, deep history here in Washington, D.C. The argument can be made that the American punk scene was born and seeded here in this city. And for a number of reasons, that is important. For a number of reasons, that's important. I don't want to have the whole conversation up here by myself right now because we have speakers who are much more poised to talk about this in a prismatic way than I am. So I just want to introduce them. Somehow Jim is sitting at the very, very back of the room, which is very Jim of him, even though he is one of our speakers. But I'll kick it off with Jim. Jim Sa is a photojournalist, artist, and historian. He's a native Washingtonian who discovered his love of photography while spending time with his first love, music. Jim is arguably responsible for one of the city's most storied archives of its own punk history, and we're happy to have him here today. The stairs are inexplicably on the back of the stage, folks, so just go ahead and walk around and hop up whenever you're ready. Our other panelist today, Anthony Trung Quang Le, is a Vietnamese-American queer multidisciplinary artist who explores dissonance and the joy of nonconformity across painting, video, sculpture, printmaking, performance, writing, and curation. And lastly, Carly Webert is the music festival director at All Things Go, which you're all familiar with, co-founder of Zap Outdoors, which we'll be talking about, a festival that brings together top electronic and punk acts from the DMV plus out-of-region favorites for a weekend camp out in Appalachia, and is an artist herself. Thank you all for being here with us today. My chair is positioned comically far away from you all, so I'm gonna remedy that. And the first question is sort of our broad, sweeping question. I like to moderate panels by letting the panel go where it's gonna go. So I'll just start with the question. In your own words, and maybe more aptly in your own story or your own experiences, what does the word punk mean? What is punk?
I have a book that in my intro, the closing quote is from Patti Smith, which I think is a great definition of punk. She said, punk is just another word for freedom. And I think that is really true, that it gives people permission and license to do what they want without being judged for it.
Hello, everyone. I'll admit that I'm not as familiar with the genre of punk as Obi was saying, so my idea of punk may be a little over-romanticized, but I'm excited to learn more about the community aspect of punk, to be honest, from each of the panelists here. Well, you can't go wrong with Patti Smith. So I think for me, freedom of expression, I'm a visual artist, so I think that freedom of expression is kind of the liberating factor of my art practice. My art practice is all over the place right now. From like painting, I have a painting in this, in the underground you can look for later. But I'm also, this year I'm really focused on dance and drag, trying to not be tied to any ideas of medium and just trying to find the right way to express myself, meet the moment, connect on a certain level. And so yeah, punk to me is about that. I think there's a lot of factors. There's like the conundrum of money in art for me, because one, artists need to make money to pay rent. You need money to make art, but money also can corrupt in our capitalist society, and it can add like a different set of values. So we can maybe talk about that more, but I've been trying to find what are the things that only I can make in this world, and my only response, and I encourage everyone else to aim for that, because I think that's a really beautiful way to engage in art.
Jim, I'm going to go back to you quickly. I think, all movements have sort of multiple beginnings, so it's hard to point to what the beginning of a punk movement or a punk aesthetic was, but I think you were there for a sort of flagship beginning, a benchmark, if not a beginning, of a scene. Can you just talk a bit about what you saw, what you felt at the beginning of your photography career in the rooms where this sort of genre movement expression thing was being fomented?
Sure. I heard punk rock at the Rocky Horror Picture Show at midnight show in Georgetown because they had a DJ that would play music before the movie started. I was like 16 years old in high school, and I was just like, immediately had a visceral reaction to it. I was like, I was very much into music, but I had a lot of older brothers and sisters, so I was very much into 60s music, and so I heard this music, and I immediately went to my record store and asked, about these bands. They're mostly British bands, they played there, but they hit me to local punk rock, and I went to see Minor Threat and Government Issue, and I was just blown away. Like, I didn't know anyone there. It was at Maryland University at the Student Union, but I immediately felt a camaraderie and a community because we were all so excited about what we were hearing and seeing. And then that just, the second show I went to, I took my camera, and I, was taking a photography course in high school, and I was like, this is better than photographing my cat, I mean, and then those two loves just like, I never stopped. I photographed music all the time. And that show was at the old 930 Club on F Street, and there's actually a photo at the Atlantis by the bathrooms of that show, and someone's stage diving, and there's all local musicians in the front, in the mosh pit, and you could just tell that everyone supported everyone. Like, all the bands that weren't playing were there to see the bands, and it's it's probably not the last time I'll say community in this talk, but I made lifelong friends there, and it's been a life's work.
Pro tip: Jim's probably going to name a lot of bands while we're up here. Write them down. I'm not even kidding. Like, this is free game. Just write it down. Minor Threat and Government Issue were the two you just named?
Yeah. Minor Threat was a seminal DC hardcore band of the early 80s. Ian MacKaye, that went on to be in Fugazi, people might have heard of. It's like they were kids, but they just wrote. Like, I don't listen, no slag against hardcore. There's tons of good hardcore bands now. My friend Maha's in a band called No Man that's like really great. And, but I don't listen to a lot of hardcore anymore, but I still listen to Minor Threat. It's melodic, the lyrics are good. It was just inspired music. And Ian went on to be in probably my favorite local band, Fugazi, after that. So those were, I would definitely check out Fugazi if you haven't heard of them, because they're post-punk. It's more accessible. There's grooves, and if you don't like, loud, fast music.
Thank you. Carly, this one's for you. The sort of conventional understanding of punk is this aesthetic and this form of expression that is free, call it chaotic, call it uncontained. Your job is to make a container for this expression, and give it form and give it a stage and give it a place. And there's something about that idea that speaks to strategy. And this is a terribly formed question because there might not be a question mark at the end of this, other than just to say how. Like, how do you see your role as the form giver to these places of expression, not the expression itself, but the places of expression? How does that look for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I've said this since the beginning of specifically Zap. It's kind of something that I feel like did come into fruition on its own accord. And I think, you know, it's definitely a celebration of what's happened, what is happening, and kind of what should be. And yeah, there's a lot of like strategy and planning, but a lot of that is like intentionally focused on how to create like this untamed experience where people in the city can get outside of the city and have uninterrupted playtime and expression, like expressive interactions with each other. Because, you know, here in DC, we're very like this thing to this thing to this thing. And this gives kind of like a long weekend of people to, you know, interact with each other. And yeah, I definitely focus on like, you know, working with artists that are revolutionary, like in spirit, like they say something without saying anything, and then that transitions into a crowd that kind of supports that. And yeah, I mean, there's some people that have been to Zap before, and like when you're there, there's a lot of spontaneity that happens because we're really hoping that people get in touch with this inner child energy that I feel like is inherently punk to like play. And you know, as like an organizer of it, like we acknowledge when there's a random, you know, occurrence of art happening. Like there was an impromptu like ambient deck that happened, and now it's like a permanent part of our, you know, programming. And there's this like wildly trippy, weird puppet party that kind of happened out of nowhere, and now it's like a very full flushed out like art experience. So it's like kind of not over policing people's ability to do what they want with that space. And I think that that is kind of what makes it this like organism that is very punk and I think free. So yeah.
I love that. Revolutionary in spirit. Revolutionary in spirit. So I'm just gonna pick on some words that you said there. Artists who are revolutionary in spirit, who say a thing without necessarily saying a thing.
Yeah.
Again, this is going to be a badly formed question, and this is probably between the two of you, honestly. Actually, all three of you. But what does that look like? I think a lot of artists and a lot of art right now, call it for the last 10 years, has been political in thought, but not necessarily revolutionary in spirit. And that's my opinion. I'm just gonna shout out, that's me. These are not the opinions of Creative Mornings or its subsidiaries, or Taste or its subsidiaries. I'm representing a lot of shit up here. This is just my thought. But I do feel oftentimes that a lot of art right now is trying to speak truth to power using the language of power, which then dilutes the art because it becomes, to your point, Anthony, about power. We're sort of using empire to bring down empire, which I don't know if that works. So talk to me a little bit about what it looks like and feels like to be an artist that is revolutionary in spirit. And maybe this is just like wax poetic about yourself. Gas yourself up for the next 5-10 minutes. Like that's what I'm asking you to do.
No, you woke me up with this question. 'Cause I don't really. Okay. It's hard to not respond to things. I think that for me, being an artist is to bear witness in some capacity. And the structure of power we're in the belly of the beast here in DC, and like that's ever present on all of our minds as we are feeling. And I think that, at least for me, revolutionary in spirit is one, being able to say things that are unpopular, because within the structure of power, there is, you know, we're in like a neoliberalism society, and there's like a lot of like posturing, and so like saying things that you really feel and engaging in dialogue is like the hardest thing to do today, I feel like. And so making work or creating environments that encourage talking is almost the most revolutionary thing, I think. I would say that there is, as for me, being an artist, it's tough because we're also very online. We're in a very online world, and like again, the performativity of that is kind of like capitalism adds a different set of values that I don't know if it makes the art better. So just being conscious of that, but also no action happens without organizing. So like we can make all of the art we want, but like the connections, the dialogue, the gathering of the numbers of people, and then organized action is how to be revolutionary in my mind. So I think that you can't have one without the other necessarily.
I love that. Kaylee said earlier, embracing individuality, then expressing it in the collective is sort of the spirit, is this idea of punk, which that's a pull quote from the talk. It's a good one. I feel like it's, anybody? No? Okay, great. Jim, this is going sort of back to you. One, we talked about this on our prep call. We had a prep call. We were so prepared, guys. We're good at this.
We're pros.
We're pros. On our prep call, we talked about not sort of romanticizing the world of punk, the history of punk, the background of punk. There are, you'll read a lot of accounts of how welcoming of a space it was, how warm of a space it was for queer folk, for folk of color, for women. There were sort of all women punk bands at some point, or early before a lot of front women were rocking the mic. But at the same time, there were these other punk spaces that were less inclusive and sort of, quite frankly, in the minds of a lot of people, kind of own the punk narrative a little bit. We talk about skinhead communities. We talk about alt-right communities. The sounds of bigotry and quote unquote anarchy that is really just masking something else. What did that look like in the rooms in the moment? Like I know you said that you never though DC seemed to be sort of shielded from that experience in a way that you didn't see other cities having that shield. What did that look like? And the follow-up question to that is, how do we respond? Like, how are we meant as a collective to respond to things like that?
Yeah, DC's a complicated scene because it was very welcoming, and it was very non-violent for those early days of punk. If you fell into the pit, there's 10 hands picking you up and stuff. In LA, I had an exhibit in LA last September, and I did a podcast with the bass player from L7 who lives in LA, and we did a lot of DC LA comparisons, and it was like super violent back then. You had like Nazi punks, and then you had the cops, so you could beaten up by other punks or by the cops at a show. Where in DC, the fire marshal might show up and try and shut you down, but the cops aren't going to, not that I'm any fan of the cops, but they didn't come in and beat us up. And for the most part, we didn't really have a big skinhead or any kind like Boston did or other cities. DC is so complicated that one of the only oi kind of Nazi punk might be a little much, but was a black gay woman named Lefty. She, and people were scared of her. Like I was scared of her. Most of the younger kids didn't, tried not to go near her because, So, yeah, it's much better and then more inclusive in some ways. And people were kids, were like, and like Amy Pickering said this in a movie that I did, Salad Days, where women. Some people may have not had the best interactions with women. They might have a juvenile approach to women, but as she said, like, we were juveniles. Like, it's not an excuse, and people grow up and learn not to treat people like that. But yeah, it wasn't a normal kind of thing, and people included. But people also said, like, gay as a pejorative, just because it was like it was the 80s. But, like, to your point, like saying something without saying it, I mean, that's great. But I think, like, back in the 80s, there was much more political activism in D.C., and this is pertinent because Positive Force is having a 40th anniversary, and they are a political organization that community, and they do benefits and stuff. And there was a lot of protesting back then, like against apartheid, like at the South African embassy, and I was part of that, and I fully supported it. But I feel like a lot of punks of my age are silent about, very similar current issues like Palestine. And it's like, it's capitalism in power, I mean, the South African question was literally black and white, so it wasn't very hard to come down on one side. But I think racism against Arabs and Palestinians is so pervasive that, people are just quiet, and it's complicated, and I don't want to weigh into it and stuff. But there's bands like Kneecap, the Irish band, that talk about it every day, and they get doxxed for it, and they're steadfast, and that's what I think is real courage.
There is, I've said this in a few different rooms. I think there's something interesting about the idea of revolution, or the idea of sort of a revolutionary spirit, and how we mobilize that to do the thing. And I think it requires three things. I think it requires hope, I think it requires energy, and I think it requires wisdom. Those are sort of, again, these are my thoughts, not CMDC or subsidiaries. Hope, energy, and wisdom. And I think that those three things are only achieved in multi-generational spaces. That's why I appreciate you sort of calling to your counterparts who are older than us and who were there at the beginning of a lot of these things, to say, like, yo, where are y'all at? Like, you might not have the energy to mobilize in the streets, but you do have the wisdom, you have the knowledge, you have the reference. The lot of us, like millennials, we are tired and we are cynical as fuck. So there's no hope. We like to pretend like we're tired as if we've done anything yet, even though, chill, you're not tired, right? And then we have no wisdom. So we got nothing. Gen Z, shout out Gen Z, y'all are decently hopeful, really energetic. All the energy. Also, very little wisdom. So like we have a lot of propulsion, but not a lot of direction. And just to double tap on, like, please continue to call to your friends to be like, look, you don't have to be in the streets, but like whatever comes next, that thing is gonna need all three of those parts in a way that is real and is really tangible. I'm watching my time here. I feel good about this time, so I'm going to ask one more question, and I'll let you guys sort of pass it as you see and feel fit to pass it. In your sort of interior lives, let's stop talking about work for a second, right? because I think Anthony, we brought up a good point. Like whatever is, if we're true to ourselves and if we're making work that is true, it's got to start from inside. What does punk look like inside? Like if you could sort of give us a glimpse into like the inner used like teenage bedroom. What's on the walls? Like what's playing in the music? Like what does that look like inside? And then we can sort of talk about how it's projected externally. Oh, he was ready. They had that. They had that ready.
Well, a lot of my art right now is thinking about my younger self and thinking about like, what are the things that I, to help my younger self, and by extension, I guess, putting that out for other younger people. And like, so I've been thinking a lot about, as I said, I've been really into drag and into dance this year. One, to just stay sane, to have a body movement just to stay sane with processing everything. But I think that if you would have known me as a teenager, this would be completely far from my existence then. So for me, it's just like really like experimenting and the idea of play, and how I think like being an artist, it's over romanticized, like artistic talent and all these things, when I feel like everybody should be playing and in their own way and like experimenting and breaking out of like these like productivity mindsets. And so for me, that's how the dance has been really matriculating, because like I before a few months ago, I didn't know anything about dance or anything about drag, and so I've been enjoying going out to performances and just learning more, and it's just been fun. That hope part of it, that joy, like it's been so joyous for me to dance, and in that way, like in my own cynical humor, I'm like trying to find that little thing that I will laugh about, but it's like not always like the most positive thing. But so just like trying to find that little space where I'm continuing to try new things is just feeling good for me right now.
I feel like what came up for me was being a kid and not loving being told what to do ever. Like, I just like feel like people told me I couldn't like do what I loved because it was never going to sustain itself. And I think just like constantly objecting these like rules and systems of the way things need to be in order to be X, Y, Z, and just constantly encouraging the people around me that they can do what they love, and it's just right in front of you is something that I really identify with for sure.
I saw a thing on Instagram the other day, like a meme that said, why are everyone I know so old? And I feel that all the time, because when I used to go to like parent-teacher conferences, I'd always say to my wife, I'm like, God, do all these people have kids late? Like, they look so old. And she's like, they're probably your age. And I'm like, you're probably right. And it's just like I've never stopped feeling the way I felt when I was a young, excited punk kid. And, I always thought something would change. I'd feel like an adult, like getting married, buying a house, having kids. But none of it did. And, and I like it that way. I mean, I'm more tired, but I still get excited. I'm excited to go to these shows tonight and see these bands and hang out with old friends and stuff, and there'll be beautiful community, and that's what it's about. And I still listen to music I did then. I listen to a lot of new music too. I was telling these guys I like to get out and see bands that I don't even know, and younger. My son plays music and stuff. So yeah, I think the spirit is alive in my old ass.
I want to open it to the audience for any questions. We only have 2 microphones, so please yell your question as loud as you possibly can, in the spirit of punk. What was the question? I don't.
You're punk, you're, you know.
Oh, yeah. My inner punk. Oh, that's a good question. Who asked that? Yeah, I like when I think about that. I think it's much like Anthony and their journey. I think it's been a lot about identity and compounding identities and understanding how those things butt against one another, but also sort of undergird one another. So I think when I think about like my inner punk drive, it has always been for the sake of creating spaces and places for like 13-year-old me and 14-year-old me, who was this like Nigerian immigrant kid who had a really weird accent that was like half British, half Nigerian, and like trying to fake a Texas twang, and who like grew up classically trained as a drummer, so like really loved like quote unquote white music, but then went to black church, like white school black church, Nigerian kid, who started playing as a session drummer in a studio in Texas that almost exclusively recorded country music, but would go to like the White Rabbit and see these weird like garage bands do their thing, who was like at home listening to Cameroonian garage funk as a kid. Like there was that black kid did not exist openly and safely at the time that I grew up as a child. And I still have very vivid memories of encounters and conversations that I would have with people telling me that I couldn't be all of the things that I was. Not even that I was trying to be, that I literally was. So for me, that punk drive is really all about creating a place where all of those identities can freely express themselves in the collective. I think that one's sticking with me. Like it really is like there are all these different parts, and all of those parts are true in and of themselves. And the truth of each part is not in conflict or in tension with the truth of the other part. They all exist together as sort of one self, and trying to desperately to like hold on to that. And to create those spaces for kids who might feel the same right now, or for adults, quite frankly, who, I always say kids, a lot of adults are trapped in this idea of singular identity and don't know how to break out of that. They're old. Not because they are old, but because they feel like they have to be old. There are things that you're supposed to do and things that you're not supposed to do when you get to a certain age or status or place. So that's kind of where that's where my drive is. That's what the room looks like in there. It's just trying to create those spaces. Start here.
So what I love about this space, literally today, is that we are underground. So that's cool. But if we're interested in like getting more involved and we're supporting the punk scene in DC, what does that look like? Like where do you show up support? Where do you show up?
Go.
I was just having a conversation right before I got up here about like this like constant need for spaces. Like it's just such a struggle in this city. Like a lot of the reason why I have a festival 2 hours from here is so I can get everyone in one space for an uninterrupted period of time and connect in nature. But we're constantly just like struggling to maintain and keep spaces, and you know, it's really hard, like financially, to have events and be DIY and local and like have to cover venue fees and staff and sound and teams. So I feel like from a support standpoint, a lot of it is just like, you know, keeping in touch with like, you know, places that might, you know, be more open to renegade kind of experiences in their under their roof, or to help kind of share resources on where events could be. And I think, you know, also like actively archiving, like we don't really archive as much as you probably did. Like, it's a very digital era, and we just kind of shout on Instagram. And I think archiving right now is really, a lost art as well. So, yeah. I don't know.
There's still places like there's a place in Tacoma Park called Rhizome that it reminds me of an old club, long closed in DC, called DC Space. It's just, and you could see anything from spoken word, poetry, music, dance. Like, it's just a space, and it's going to close, but they got a new space somewhere. So you should follow them, and if you want to see, cool underground like stuff, they're a good spot. And then, there's clubs like DC9 that are independent and have, it's a good vibe. It's a small place, and, they have cool bands and stuff. It takes a bit of work, but easier now than it used to be. I mean, you used to have to get a flyer at a show to see what was going on. And you would think that would be harder, but it's almost like you were saying, it's just you're yelling into the internet. And like, I miss things. I follow all the things that I'm interested in, and I miss things all the time. And I'm like, shit, I follow that site. Like, even my friend's gallery in Mount Pleasant, like I follow everything, and I'm like, I don't see openings and stuff. It's just algorithms and stuff.
I'd say find the place and then follow the place. I don't mean like literally like Instagram follow the place. I mean literally follow the place. Go to the place, talk to the people in the place, know about the place, support the place. Lost Origins Gallery, I think, is what Jim's talking about. In Mount Pleasant, we've got Rhizome in Tacoma, Transformers over there off of 14th Street. Independent galleries, independent spaces. Also, if you want the underground, go ahead and make the underground. Right? House shows. The city was born, our scene was born on house shows because the city has never not been expensive. Plot twist. It's not new. It's always been expensive to operate in space in DC. So, punk kids, other artists decided to just do shit in their homes. Ask your neighbors, talk to your neighbors, invite your neighbors, be a good neighbor as you're doing this. Don't be a dick. But if you do want the scene, I think at a certain level we have to make the scene. And a house show can happen in an apartment, 2-bedroom, studio, in a house. Just do it. We have...
House shows are awesome.
Carly can connect you to artists who need venues. Like, literally, that's kind of how we do the thing, especially in a place right now where it's hard to do the thing.
Deal with that tension while maintaining underground cultural vibe.
For those who didn't hear, the tension between the DIY sort of conditioned spirit of this punk idea, and then the pressure, which is sort of the reality of having to create something that's sustainable and can be sustained. How do we sort of work in that tension?
Yeah, I'll let you know how I figure it out. Still working through that. I think it's really challenging, and I think we, as more local scene current organizers, struggle with that in some ways, but I think it is kind of easy of just building off of an intention of keeping things raw and keeping things kind of like, one quote we have is like, pare down to the essence, but don't remove the poetry. So it's like really just like keeping things at the pure form of its art without trying to like over intellectualize it or over kind of like, I don't know, build stuff with it. But it's definitely, really important to stay true to the values of like this anti-corporate and, very like, political kind of experience, and not letting things get too washed from feeling like a very like transactional experience. Like, you go to a lot of venues like a 930 club that I love so much, but it's very much like, you're in line, you're getting checked, you're going in. And I think like we also really need experiences that feel more free forming. So I think that's kind of what, there needs to be like another kind of avenue for that. But yeah.
At least the people at 930 are nice. Yeah. It's like when you go to the Fillmore, everyone's a dick. It's like, talk about a corporate experience. But just one
Hey guys, we're never going to have an event at the Fillmore. Unfortunately, that is on record. So
one of our sponsors. No, but just a clarification on what you said about it was always expensive. The thing about the 80s in DC is the city was bankrupt, and it was not expensive. And that's why the punk scene flourished, because rents were low because everyone just worked for the government and went home at night. No one did anything downtown. It was the crack epidemic, the murder capital of the country, and most big cities were like this. Like New York was like it. I mean, the whole underground film scene in New York, Jim Jarmusch and all those people, they just ran around the city making movies and squatting in Manhattan, and no one cared. And we had the same thing down here, like that I mentioned earlier, DC Space. It was a Starbucks for a while. It's right on 7th and like E, and you could do stuff then, and not the, I don't want to glorify, the bad old days of, things being high crime and stuff, but it was conducive to making art. Not crime, just that the city was bankrupt, and you could do stuff, and you could places, and no one wanted to charge you an arm and a leg. And
Carly, when you all did the first year of Zap, was there ever a plan to do it again? Like in the planning of the first year?
I think so. Like, I really do think that we were hoping to do it again. And then last year it was very clear that, like, oh, this is a 10-year commitment now. You know what I mean? Like, it just is whatever it takes to keep it around. And it just is something that has to keep growing into its own thing.
Yeah, the contribution I have to that question is don't assume that it has to sustain. I think we assume sustainability. We assume that things have to happen again because they happen once. And I think if we look at sort of ecosystems like if you look at the idea of an ecosystem, right? We talked about punk being an ecosystem. It lives, it dies, it wanes, it waxes, it does this thing. There are plenty of organisms in ecosystems that are only concerned with their sort of, like mushrooms come to mind. Like the mycelium is this living, breathing thing that exists globally, but the individual mushroom is unconcerned with proliferating itself. It just lives and then it dies. Yeah. And it dies knowing that it contributes to, maybe not knowing, but it dies and then contributes to something else living. So if it happens once, it happened. That's good in and of itself. And I think that's the sort of like embracing the DIY spirit, is letting a thing happen once, happen as well as it's going to be. And if it comes back for 2 years.
Yeah, and letting know when something is done is very much like a big part of it for sure.
Yeah. I think we got time for, I'm getting the high sign, we got time for maybe one more question, and then we got to start breaking down.
Thank you for that question. I think that, like, my upbringing, I grew up in the South, so my upbringing was also very much like an outsider's perspective of society and things like that. So I'm always looking for kind of things that, Right now, I'll say, right now I'm looking for things that cause dialogue. because one, I'm kind of adverse to dialogue in some ways, but also our society has kind of moved that way in a very individualistic way. So I think that like I'm looking for ways to talk to people who might not agree. We might not agree on things, but to talk to people again. I think I have a good model of that in my family. Like I'm very close to my sister, but we're like politically the opposite. But we can still like have these opposite conversations and still love each other. So I don't know. That's like I'm kind of trying to find people like that and make community with people who are open to that. Yeah.
That's a very noble endeavor. I find that I have less filters in my. If someone is willing to learn and have an open mind, I'll have a respectful conversation with them. But if they come at me with like racist tropes or things, I'll just speak out and speak up. I mean, you can't choose your family, so you should. It's good you love your sister, even though you have different views. A lot of families don't do that, but yeah, I have a sister that's I still love her, but don't agree with anything she believes in. But anyway.
No, I think I just seek out experiences that are just going to show me a new universe. I think like the more you dive into this world and even if you come across a weird hobbyist and then you take a second to dive into their miniatures obsession and then you see this whole new universe of stuff, and I feel like I constantly get, inspiration from, people who have a very specific universe within, this whole system we're all sharing together. So
Courage is borrowed before it's cultivated. I fully believe that. I have to borrow courage on a daily basis and just figure out where that borrowed courage is coming from. Is it an elder? I posted on my Instagram the other day, Prince, during George Harrison's rock and roll, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction and commemoration, Prince during My Guitar Gently Weeps, riffs on this 3-minute long guitar solo that no one else on stage knew he was about to play. And when it's one of them, the dude is so virtuosic, right? But it's one of the moments where you see the virtuosity at work, and it's everyone has no choice in this planned and structured, sort of highly planned and highly produced and structured environment. Everyone has no choice but to just sit back and let it happen. And so watching things like that give me that borrowed courage to move how I feel like my creative spirit is asking me to move. I have a neighbor, Miss Deborah. We have porch time every once in a while, and I'll just sit with Miss Deborah. And Miss Deborah grew up at a time where it was a lot harder to be black than it is today. And I borrow courage from her. But it doesn't have to be your own. I think we oftentimes think that if we don't have it from within, then we can't have it. It's no, we're all borrowing it from people next to us, from people around us. So, and with that, I want to thank this group for allowing us to borrow some of their courage and their boldness and their punk spirit. It is 10 o'clock, but again, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and yep. So as you know, if you don't know, when we sort of gather, it's something that I started doing a few years ago. Somebody flag me if I should not do what I'm about to do. I see no flags. Great. We started about 3 years ago. I think in this city we move really fast, and we move from thing to thing to thing to thing. And the thing that we're moving from and the thing we're moving to might sort of bear some fruit and have some sort of nutrients, but we don't sit long enough to let that thing soak in. So what we do as a community here is after all of our talks, we do anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes of collective silence. I see some people squirming. Basically, we're just going to sit in silence together. And we're going to feel whatever the person next to you or the person behind you or the person in front of you is feeling. We're all just going to do the mushroom thing. We're all one. We're not doing mushrooms today. Let me be clear on camera. But we are going to sort of all come together in creative spirit and just feel each other's energies. Take on the grief, take on the joy, take on the anxiety, whatever it is your neighbor's feeling. Try to orient to that. in a minute or two of uncomfortable silence. I promise it'll be weird. We'll push through it. It'll feel good. I will start in 3, 2, 1. Everyone take a deep breath in and release it. One more deep breath in. Release this one louder than the last one. There we go. So I'll come back to our bodies slowly. Deep breath in and out and in and out. One more in and out loud. There we go. I really appreciate y'all. My favorite moment before any concert is that moment of silence just before the first note hits. Sometimes it's like a second long, sometimes it's like a millisecond long, but like you feel it, and it's that moment of anticipation. I feel that in this room. I want you guys to take whatever you've heard today, a nugget, a quote, a piece of it, anchor to it, let it be a seed that grows into something for you this week and this month. And we'll see you all next month. I don't know where we are, and I don't know what our theme is, because it's no longer my job to know that. But it'll be somewhere good. It'll be something good. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.